Welcome to the Java Cafe, Java fam. Good morning. Welcome to the Java Cafe, Java fam.
That should have definitely said good afternoon. I need to update that or get an afternoon one. It's been a while. You are tuned in to Java with Jimmy, a special midday episode. We have our monthly discussion with Mayor Michelle Wu. I'm calling it We Need to Know Wednesdays with Wu. She was to be with us last month, but was not able to make it right after the Summer Safety Violence Prevention Press Conference. We'll talk a little bit about the result of that, but she is on a limited schedule, so we don't want to waste any time and bring her right in. I'm going to ask you to go ahead and hit the share button. I'm getting texts literally right now with questions and stuff, but we have a consensus based on what I've observed on social media, also some of my own questions, but we're going to bring in our mayor, Mayor Michelle Wu, who is no stranger to the Java Cafe. I was getting ready to say good morning, good afternoon, Mayor Wu. How are you?
I'm good. I'm in the Uplands Corner Library, so I'm found a little spot in between a couple meetings, and love to be out in the community checking on things anyway. So thanks for having me on again. How are you?
I am doing well, and shout out to the team, to Chief Pierre and others, because they were adamant. They were like, listen, the last couple of times the mayor's been in the car, it's not the best aesthetic, and so they worked to have that happen here. And I told them I was open to 9 to 12, but shout out to the team and Michael and others that made this happen, and Phyllis as well. Want to give them a shout out. And so, Mayor, let's jump right in. First, how are you doing? I know, there's a lot you're managing, a lot to deal with, the recent things with the MBTA. Though it's not a city thing, the city of Boston puts a lot of money into the MBTA, but let us know how you're doing.
Yeah, $90 million. And it just feels like one step forward, 3 steps back, 2 steps forward. So incredibly frustrating. I'm good. What's been most on my mind is wrapping up these searches that we have ongoing. Yes. Really important big roles. And as you saw, the BPS school superintendent interviews are happening tomorrow and the next day, with the school committee planning to take a vote the Wednesday after that. Police commissioner, we are, the search committee has, I believe, concluded final interviews. And so now it kind of kicks over to me to meet their recommendations and do some interviews myself. And then the fire department as well. We're trying to wrap up a search and new leader by the end of the month. So we're on
Jack is leaving. Jack Dempsey is
leaving. So there's mandatory retirement at age 65 at the end of the month in which you turn 65. And so his birthday was last week. And yep.
Okay. A good guy there, And so you gave us a little bit of room to talk about some other things, because the updates on the commissioner and the superintendent were a part of the agenda here. One of the things I want to jump right in, this is my wheelhouse. We talked about it when you were at-large counselor for always, or a lot, not necessarily for always, but you weren't able to appear last month because there was the press conference at 11. You were to come on at 12. And I watched it, gave some live in-person commentary while it was going on. And it did leave some room for some that there's still some concerns that we're not aware. And I'm saying that purposely because we don't know all the ongoings of City Hall with Dr. Falk and others and whatnot. We did have Mark Scott on a couple of weeks ago, and finally, 4.5 years, we got some answers to SSYI. But how would you respond to the notion that those that move in the space of violence prevention still feel that there needs to be more and a clear articulation of what the actual plan is in order to work with the community to keep our streets safe for our young people. And unfortunately, our elders are impacted by this as well. And so what is your response to the fact that there's still a desire for a more concrete plan?
I completely agree that we need more. I think in every area across the city, we are 7 months into really getting under the hood and realizing that in some cases, it's like years on years on years of deepening challenges that are going to take some time to first even just stabilize the city's organization around, right? Who's in which roles, lots of empty roles. How do we fill those? How do we, and all of this is happening in the same, in like two timeframes at once. There's the, we, every day, every weekend, there's urgency. And in some ways we're kind of bracing for the unexpected happening in all areas, right? Same thing that's happening with the MBTA because of decades of deferred maintenance. We have pools that are on the verge, that are past, 1988 to 2000. We have pools that are 20 years past their useful, like expected life expectancy for that, type of facility that we've been patching with Band-Aids. And I think that kind of Band-Aid approach we've seen in a lot of areas. And you can't just, after something has like layers of Band-Aids on it, it's not going to be fixed overnight. But you do need to figure out what the immediate plan is while you're trying to also do the structural changes. And so that kind of like, okay, we're here right now, what can we do immediately? But what can we also make sure we won't be in this position next year, next summer, next pool, thinking long-term like that is a lot of shifting back and forth. I think in terms of violence prevention and summer safety in particular, there's been a long history of, I think, neglect or need for more coordination that has been tremendously demoralizing for those city staff who have been involved in this over many years now. And so we're looking to, in some ways, make sure that first and foremost, this summer, we have the plan ready to go implementing, but more importantly, that it won't feel like this unsettled kind of how are we holding things together by a thread come next summer and everyone after that.
What is the when you said incorporating the plan or implementing it, what that is the meat of the question. What is the plan? We are aware that there were 20 ambassadors that I understood in that meeting we both were in that were at one point going to be vetted, suggested, raised up by the community around street credibility. And so I know that's one point of the plan, but what are sort of the other and I'll be honest with you, you referred to Band-Aid, and during the campaign, I and many viewed you as this new surgeon, a new fellow resident coming up. There was the energy of new and progressive. And in all fairness, you referenced also to, walking up to the car in the campaign is one thing, lifting the hood and in fairness, but there is sort of this sentiment that as an at-large counselor, there was familiarity. And so expectation and some expectations were set from the campaign and from you that there would be sort of this radical movement in some areas, and mass and cast there was and whatnot. So there is this sort of weighting of this progressive surgeon type, no more Band-Aid fixing in virus prevention. And that is what a lot of people, and I'll say me and some others, are waiting to see and hear.
Yeah. And so I think two notes. One is that in some ways, even talking about the need for plans, what is the plan in and of itself is a little bit, and with all due respect, it's a little bit distracting because we know what the plan is, right? In many areas, we know what we need to do, right? And there's actually a whole document written out in this area where it's, okay, hold on, I'll pull it up so I have all the exact wording here that Dr. Falk has put forward. So key strategies for summer 2022, it's divided into all different chapters. increase employment and training opportunities to engage more youth and young adults, strengthen violence intervention efforts through expanded intentional outreach and engagement to specific populations. These communities are laid out, residents at BHA, young people who have been formerly involved with the court system, et cetera, increase community engagement in public spaces as a means to connect neighborhoods to supportive services. But we can have words on a piece of paper, but that is still a Band-Aid in some ways, right? A Band-Aid of like, okay, now we said we have something. The real meat of the question is, how are people actually feeling the results of the efforts on the ground, right? Is this community center, which we know is really important in this area of the city, going to stay open longer hours? Are they going to have programming there that our young people can count on, that is fully staffed and all that? And I think the areas where we have seen bold and radical change, it's not a coincidence that those areas are the places where we were able to most immediately identify strong cabinet chiefs and department heads and just empower them to go, right? I don't like to toot my own horn, but I will say I know the issues in the city, but one person isn't going, no matter who it is, right? What one street worker, one social worker in our schools, one teacher, one super, no one on their own is going to be able to address and fix everything. I see my most important job in this first year as getting the right people in the driver's seats in all these areas. And with violence intervention and prevention in particular, I think not having the processes finished for police commissioner and school superintendent has been a huge part of that as well. We only recently onboarded our new chief of human services, who's incredible, Jose Masso. And so he's been on, we just had a check-in sort of on how the first 4 weeks or so have gone. So some people are still getting ramped up, and next year, I guarantee you, it'll be a very different conversation with empowered cabinet chiefs and leaders in these roles. And in the meantime, everybody's kind of pulling together across all departments. There is a plan, but how that feels, how that's rolled out, how that is actually implemented on the ground really is going to require a lot of direct feedback from community members that until we have key roles filled, it sometimes doesn't filter all the way through the organization.
I definitely understand there. And there's a couple of things that you said that want to take me in a different area, but I wanted to sort of piggyback and go into the space where you talked about empowering cabinet chiefs and departments. And I've shared this with you privately. There is among some pundits and then also those in the community that have experienced delays or waits and things. And there is a sentiment because one of the questions we're talking about getting your footing and your grounding. And I know that you're doing your best to empower those and whatnot, but there is sort of a concern that having key people in positions with a balance of institutional knowledge, and then also we appreciate the new and innovative and the young and whatnot, but there seems to be some concern. And again, this isn't just me, but again, pundits, but punditry eventually slips into the people, and it has, that there are some that could have came in with some more professional, experience, or hasn't been a good mesh between institutional knowledge and also what we would just classify, with all due respect, as newbies. And so what is your response to taking a look? And I've talked to some folks, I'm friends with a lot of folks, and I've mentioned, and one of the folks said to me, Jimmy, just give us just a little bit more patience. And I definitely understand that. But there was this expectation of hitting the ground running. And your interview yesterday, you said that about the superintendent. And so with that expectation of the superintendent, there were pundits and people that sort of had that expectation from this administration. So what is your response to the fact that it's just taking a little bit longer to get the footing of that balance of institutional folks and new folks, where they're coming together, doing what worked, and then building out, new innovative ideas?
Yeah. So, one thing I would say is that newbies turn into oldies like very soon, right? So there's something about, we of course want to make sure that everything that we're doing is grounded in the day-to-day community street level experiences of our residents. And there's just a familiarity that comes with being from Boston, familiar with the structures, knowing how the pieces fit together. And it's really important to honor that, especially as we're making decisions about some of these biggest every role is big, but I think there could be consensus that between schools, police, BPDA, and sort of development and public safety, those are some pretty big roles to fill. And that's what we're looking for in all of those, people who can hit the ground running. And then I think another thing that I will just say is one big learning curve for me in this job, to some extent, we had to do this on the council, but it's a very different scale and depth.
As mayor, that's fair.
As mayor is that I think people want to see the results, and I need to do a better job of just communicating along the way. Sometimes it's not like the big things can take a long time to pop, but there's a lot of little things sometimes that are happening step by step, and we just need to do a better job of highlighting those, sharing those. It's not like any department is just sort of sitting and waiting while these roles are being filled. There's been a ton of work that Dr. Falk and Reverend Scott and all the BPHC, BCYF, BPS, BPD have already all been coordinating on. And so to get to that point where there's summer safety press conference was like meeting, to plan for meeting, to coordinate this, to figure out the hours of BCYF centers. And so I think sharing a little bit more along the way is also something that we need to do.
I agree, because Darren Howell, as you know, often says if it's not documented, it did, quote unquote, it didn't happen. And I'll be fair and balanced. I had expressed concerns about, and I've mentioned this to you before when you were a counselor and then, as mayor, about being more vocal about when you do engage with the survivors of homicide, and no, you don't have to tweet and publicize every phone call you make to a mother. No, but just because ignorance is bliss, and awareness can be a good thing, knowing about the little steps and being done. Therefore, and I'll be honest, it decreases some of the critiques, because people know, and as a public servant, make the service, public. So it's great to hear.
That's our responsibility.
We only have about 9 minutes left. Thank you for the updates on the commissioner and the superintendent. I will give credence that those are, two big positions that have influence on violence, but with all that's going on, we can't wait.
That's right.
COVID updates. I know that there is, up and down. There was some concerns about, I think, the last 3 days of school, kids were able, whatever the days were, the numbers, that there was a relaxing of the mask, and there was some pushback with that, because we made it through this year, not without incident, but those, God forbid a breakout happens in those days. And so what are the COVID updates? Summer's coming. Are there any things, within ethics with Dr. Basola that we just need to be aware of, away from getting vaxxed, getting boosted? If you're over 50, get your second boost. What is it that you would say to us around COVID updates from your standpoint?
So first, speaking of Dr. Basola, I just have to share this because just to show you how much she has done in the community and continues to do. I was at Franklin Park for the Roxbury Homecoming and Juneteenth over the weekend, and a gentleman flagged me over, he looked kind of agitated, and he started saying, you took my doctor. And I was like, I'm so sorry. What do you mean? And he goes, Dr. Basola was my doctor. And he was so excited that she's in this role because she had been incredible. He was like, she went above and beyond every time to, even if it wasn't something that I needed directly for medication or whatever, she was always there. So shout out to Basola for the many people. And thank you, sir, for sharing, for giving out, sacrificing so that we could all have access to her. She and her team have been monitoring everything and keeping me updated. I will say, side note, that the team has also grown. We just recently onboarded Dr. Simon, who is our new chief of behavioral health.
And then let's just
get him on. I'll make a note, but he's amazing.
But the team, John Latino over there did reach out, so he's waiting on me for a date. But I did notice that, and him being a Black man, I think, because we've shared before, and I've shared with Dr. Basola about, the compounded exponential trauma around violence, people that lost people during COVID, being Black, you know, and in this post-racial, well, we're still reckoning around race, but I definitely did see that. And so we are in the process of getting him on. Do you see, just to jump to the point, do you see that there are going to be right now any reactivating of mass, you know,
Oh, sorry.
mandates
Yes.
indoor or
There's actually still a recommendation for masking indoors, and we did lift the blanket requirement for school masking. My kids have continued to go to school in masks, and their teachers have sort of issued that as a recommendation for their classrooms as well. But it is mask optional depending for whatever families decide. The reason why we did it at this point, you know, people are saying, why didn't you hold on? There were 10 days left at that point. I mean, the reality is that for my kids, there's 10 more years of being in BPS with COVID, right? It's not going away. And we're now in a different phase of living with this virus. We were watching the data very carefully. When other cities took off masks in schools, when the governor issued that decree, we kept ours on for many months later because the numbers were still going up. The case counts and the trends were going up. But once we hit a 2-week straight decline in the trending and the case counts, that is a point at which the Boston Public Health Commission felt comfortable with the moving to mask optional, with provisions for any classroom level or school level required masking. If there were any, you know, certain number of cases per classroom, those students would mask back up. And I think that's going to be the policy that we need to have moving into the future, is something that's much more targeted and tailored, because this is going to be around for the next years. And then I you know, just COVID safety in general, we did see there's now authorization for vaccinations for even young children, even younger children at this
last
point.
Couple of days,
so that'll make a big difference in our ability to think about
Can I ask you
apply those policies.
a personal question, Mayor? And we've had other mayors that are parents, but you know, you're a mom mayor that has they're not tweens yet. With where ethically or whatever, how are you feeling as a parent about the vaccination? Your children are over 5.
4 and 7.
4 and 7. Okay. And so just a side note, as a parent, how are you dealing with making the decision around getting your child vaccinated? Because there is the benefit. We know early on that, because I was staying away from kids early in COVID because we were joking and saying they were carriers and all that. And so there is a benefit. As a parent, real quick, how are you handling the decision to get your children vaccinated or not? With all, you know, I don't want to pry.
Well, I will say that kids are always carriers of everything. I feel like the first 2 years in daycare, they brought back just about everything that there was and then got this super immunity. You know, I think it starts when you become pregnant and all of a sudden your body's changing. You become so hyper aware of everything that you're can't drink, can't eat, this and that. And then when this new little being comes into the world and you're entirely responsible, it's a different like sensitivity to I'm making decisions that will affect how they will live their lives like 20, 30 years down the line. And you don't want to make the wrong decision on anything, right? Education, vaccines, all of that. It was really interesting with Blaze. He got the first shot basically almost as soon as it was available. We had asked him, he's in first grade, and they had conversations in class. He had seen me get vaccinated and my husband, and he was like, he couldn't wait to go. He was like, I'm doing it. And, you know, I think we're in a global pandemic, and the science, the doctors are very clear about what's in the best interest. Does it have risks? Everything has risks. Every single vaccine has some risks, but does not getting the vaccine have even greater risk? Yes.
I remember last year or 2020, they were saying that it was 2021 where it was that big movement and the vaccinations got approved, that the risk outweighed the benefits. And so thank you for being transparent and sharing that as a mom, and it was great to hear that you were checking, you were checking, and asked your son, do you want to get vaccinated? I think that's a good parenting model.
You would have gotten it anyway, but
Okay.
we're glad it worked out.
I had that kind of thought in the back of my head, but that's good parenting, and I'm learning, with young people, we grew up what children are seen and not heard, and we didn't have an opinion. And so this new model, of parenting, children have opinions and whatnot.
It backfires.
That's a whole different Zoom.
Think they know more than me on everything, but
absolutely,
that's another story for another day.
It is changing with parenting. The last thing I wanted to ask you, Mayor Wu, about is mass and CAS. That was the number one thing. I got texts and inboxes, and are you going to ask about this? This was the number one thing, was like violence prevention. Today, though, it was like the MBTA. The MBTA, is that city or state, or city or state? I'm like, it's state, but I'm sure you do, have some influence there. But mass and CAS, that was one of the radical things that you came out and did, early on, and then things happened. And so where are things now with mass and CAS, and not just mass and CAS, but Nubian Square? We were all there the other day having the wonderful block party, everybody looking good. But then just 2 blocks up the street, Nubian Square is interesting. I went there one day, businesses are closing early. And I say this respectfully to those that are dealing with the sickness around disease, but they're walking around looking like they're not alive. And so there is a lot going on, not just Mass and CAS, Nubian Square, Roll Down, Shawmut, Lenox, seeing sort of the same visual. Where are things with Mass and CAS and other areas?
So I think my general approach is that I can only do my job if I am telling the full truth about everything. And that includes what we have done, what we haven't done, but also trying to set real expectations for what is possible, right? And Mass and CAS, I do just want to be honest that it's a different set of issues in the fall and winter when it's cold versus in the spring and summer when people can be there and not have any worry of cold, hypothermia, cold, all of that. And so to just anchor us in where we have been over the last few years, by this time last summer, we had seen tents popping up everywhere on the way to 300 tents at one point, all in Newmarket Square, Atkinson Street, et cetera. And so our number one goal, and again, it's not, unfortunately, it's just not possible to make our number one goal, like fixing everything and having a just, everyone suddenly disappear. It's that's not how we get to the root of the problem. Our number one goal is making sure we don't end up where we were at the end of last summer, which is 300 tents and fortified structures, extremely dangerous for everyone involved. And so there's been a really diligent effort. Every day there are tents that go up, that get taken down, with the collaboration between the Boston Public Health Commission, our new resource coordinator, and Tanya Del Rio and her team, and the Boston Police. We have started running shuttles between Mass and CAS and service providers throughout the area. And a good number of people who know they need services will get on the shuttles and go to a different location, whether that's St. Francis House or Rosie's Place or Health Center. And again, we want to just try to give every possible chance to de-densify that area and not have crowds. That is the major challenge. We also put out an RFP recently for any community health centers or other locations that want to offer the type of wraparound services, low threshold access day spaces that we had seen at the engagement center. The capacity of the engagement center has been now recalibrated to for public safety reasons, to really focus just on service providing medical treatment, as opposed to being a space where there can be more of a free-for-all. And so we need to decentralize those kinds of spaces as well. And then we continue to work on the RFP for the Shattuck just came out from the state.
I saw that.
That could be a location where, I think the ultimate hope is that services such as currently being provided in the Roundhouse could be located there, and then ultimately Long Island. And so success right now is coordinating between all the departments so that the streets look as clean as possible, with Public Works going in and picking up litter and debris that accumulates, improving the area, sort of beautifying the community with plantings and all that, keeping people safe, and keeping tents down. That is the top goal, is that we will be in a different place next winter than we were last winter, when we had to really have a sort of all hands on deck effort that took resources and staff time.
It was a lot, and there's still there's a canyon, for improvement, and the community is a part of that as well. And I'm trying, we're over time, but Mike hasn't put in anything that she got to go yet. So one of the questions that was asked is, and I know Dr. Basola isn't here, but I'm sure you're staying up to date. Are there any major concerns that you have around monkeypox in Boston?
Yeah, so Boston was home to the first case in the country here, and there have been a few other cases since then. Dr. Basola, from all the briefings, is at this stage not. I don't want to say she's never not concerned, because she's always concerned about everything. She's but there's no reason for alarm at this stage. Monkeypox is much less contagious than other types of transmissible diseases, and it's mostly about getting the word out into community, that people just need to be aware and need to know that this is something that everyone has to be vigilant about.
Thank you. I don't want to abuse the time, so we can have you back on time every month. But I will share with Mayor one last thing. If you could give a response, and we've talked about this, I'm a little away from the public health subject, but Boston Poly is interesting. You've been a part of it for 13 years at different levels and whatnot. And one of the things that I have mentioned to a lot of folks is this term, Black Boston Poly trauma. And we know that, election season and campaigning and whatnot, the Black voter bloc is engaged in various manners on a macro, micro level. And oftentimes post-election, things get interesting with some candidates, whether they win or whatever. And that caused for some Black folks, brown folks too, some trauma. And so what is your response to folks that move in spaces, believe in candidates' vision, support and help, and then when there is when they pursue opportunities to continue to help, that may not happen? How do you respond, or what do you say to that term in one of the ways that Black Boston Poly trauma ensues in certain individuals and groups?
Yeah, it's absolutely justified and real, and the only way to do better is to do better. And so I think there's no one is going to agree with the decisions of any politician 100%. The best way to make sure that your views and passions and the community that you want to fight for are represented is to get in the thick of it and to get ready, right? There are elections every year in Massachusetts, and whether it's as a candidate or as a staff person on a campaign or community volunteer, I guess I hope people don't see it as a on-off switch or a all or nothing.
Some do.
But there's the goal is that there needs to be every single cycle that sustained relationship, pressure, accountability cycle. But it's exhausting. It's exhausting, and the burden should not be on community. And so I hope more and more that as the candidates who are successful and the organizations that mobilize to create accountability structures for example, the mayor's race, as pushing some of our Greek organizations, say make sure to do the same forums for the governor's race too, right? That there was so much excitement and important intentional focus and getting people directly into the community. We can't lose out on the statewide elections also being connected in that way. And I want to hear it if there are ways in which I should be plugging in on the statewide elections in a different way, or moving faster, doing better. That's really important to me.
And is that same sentiment also around basic city services, programming and whatnot that the city partners with and oversees? You want to hear that feedback and accountability.
Basic city services is my jam.
Did you say your jam?
It's something that we can always do, right? There's some issues that get brought to me, like I can't fix, national immigration issues today. We can try to help in this way, or I can't fix this or that, but a pothole I can fix, right? Lights I can fix, or the team can. So that I actually am really, really excited. We need to do better there too. I know the roads are in tough shape still this season, and so we're getting our way around on the potholes, the road resurfacing, graffiti, all that stuff. But that's right in our wheelhouse of what we can take care of. And so let us know, because we want to be doing it faster too.
Absolutely. And let's just name also, as we get ready to let you go, that, your budget doesn't kick in until July 1st. And there were questions about the police overtime budget didn't get cut, but some youth development or youth jobs got cut, or funding for that.
Oh, that's an important one to clarify. So
yes.
The administration put forward a first draft of the budget.
Yep.
That included more funding for youth jobs than ever before. We had only ever funded up to 5,000 jobs, 5,000 summer jobs in previous years. This year, in the very first version of the budget, I was like, we're going to blow that away. We funded 6,000 jobs. So far, we still actually have 2,500 spots open for this summer. So we need help filling those anyway.
And that's been a concern. In all fairness, that's been a concern for a couple of years, that there hasn't been the response from the young people like it used to be when I was a teenager. So we got to name that down.
There's various reasons why, right? The program is like only a certain number of weeks. It takes a long, complicated set of paperwork sometimes to.
I did hear that too.
Prove your residency and this and that. So we need to do better on all those fronts. Anyway, so we put in the very first version of our budget even more youth jobs than the city's ever had. The council got to return their own budget, which added even more on top of that, and added some other areas. Our return version of the budget, because we didn't have as much funding as the council was estimating if we were not drawing from the police overtime line item, which is just, we can't, it's not a real place to draw from, then we reduced the amount that the council added on top of our first ad, but it still was an additional, I'm trying to remember, an additional like $3.7 million, I think, on top of our additional 1,000 on top of last year. So we couldn't do the full
of what the council had proposed. So exactly. It wasn't a cut. No. It was an iteration.
Yeah, exactly.
Got you covered. Thank you, Mayor. It's so much to try to cover in 41 minutes, and shout out to the team for not beating me up and getting you up. There go. I see the private 5-minute heads up. That was at 12:41. So I still got 5 minutes left. But Mayor, I honestly think that we covered everything for this month. COVID updates, MBTA and administration getting grounded, COVID updates, mass and cast, summer school, fireworks. Yeah. They are active again. And, it depending on where you live, the activity is interesting. There was a fireworks task force with Mayor Walsh. I understand it with Mayor Janey, Rudney, and Dante, who's now with, Frank. What is the administration, or what is your awareness of what the administration is going to do to try to decrease, technically Jack Dempsey was on 20 and 21, decrease the use. They are technically illegal. What is the city doing to ensure that people aren't continually traumatized, animals aren't made scared, survivors of homicide, hear those like Pastor Oldham, he's very active when they go off. Where are we with fireworks as a city entity?
Yeah, it's this one is a really hard one. I think the things that we can do that will continue to be done are working with to try to, in some ways, cut off access to the fireworks being illegally brought over and sold in Massachusetts. Anyway, that last year there were a couple instances where there were sort of massive trucks that were found and were able to get that supply out. The advertisements, right, around this time of year, people had started to get lots of flyers in the mail from New Hampshire companies.
Oh,
And so
they're active again. I forwarded to Chief Millar and the fireworks task force team. They're very active again.
So the Attorney General's office was very helpful in just making sure that those companies got notice that they
Yep.
were not supposed to be doing that. And so that, I think, is another area. And then I think the community involvement was on every issue is extremely helpful. If we know that there are certain hotspots, we can try to lean it. But like oftentimes with the fireworks, as soon as someone calls, they're gone. And it's also, it's just a tough spot to be in terms of bringing in our, anyway,
There's
better about how we can engage community members on understanding the impact and appealing to folks.
Will you reinvigorate some sort of task force that's community? We were intentional. There were some folks that I've even bought on a platform that we call Lighters. Will that sort of task force group, not that particular one or whatever, but will there be an entity that we came up with signage, brochures, we did a commercial. And so will that sort of model continue under your administration?
Yeah, let me check with the team what the plan was. And also, we don't need to reinvent the wheel, right? We should be taking some of those materials and pushing them right back out. So that'll be my homework from this call.
All right, Mayor, thank you so much. Michael, thank you for your flexibility. And Mayor, I'm not sure if you know him, but I just saw a note, and you probably do over the years. We just got word, I don't know if, someone shared that Larry Wu, the musician, has passed. And so I just wanted to share that as well. But Mayor, thank you so much for being with us today. We'll see you next month and talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you so much. See you
later. Thanks, Michael. So we had our mayor there. No disrespect to, I'm just very sensitive to, and if it's out on social media or whatever, I haven't seen it yet, but I don't like making announcements without seeing it like from the family or whatever. So there is a reference in the comments that Larry Wu has passed. We definitely want to hold his family in prayer. Tito just posted a tweet about his musicianship and the song and the Tito dance that Larry created, I believe, in Tito's last run for city council. So thank you all for tuning in for Midday Java for We Need to Know Wednesdays with Wu. It is impossible to get everybody's question. I would encourage you that if you did not, most folks will inbox, text, and especially if you're active often in the Java Cafe, when you hear about the mayor coming on, get me those. I take a consensus of what I get, and I present that to her as well, along with, I'll be honest, along with some of my own questions. All right. Thank you all so much for tuning in today. And we will see, today's Wednesday. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. We have a guest at 9 a.m. And then we're at the ICA at 5 p.m. tomorrow. So if you have not registered as of yet, make sure you go and register. We're at over 100 registrants. And so can you say the word nervous? But yes, tomorrow at 9 a.m., tomorrow at 8 a.m., tomorrow at 9 a.m., and tomorrow at 5 p.m. at the ICA.